Welcome back to Prof E Plays. I'm Prof E, and we're picking up here with Cepheus as we are returning to the story of our trio, Genie and Company, I guess is what we would call them. So just a reminder of where we are. We are currently starting up episode 12. What has come so far, right, is that we have learned of a plot to assassinate the leader of a significant charity here on the planet in which we're located. Planet's name, Lenore. That's it. Or Lenore, like Lanor. So we've learned about this plot. We've learned some details related to it, but our plan was that our party was going to uh, yeah, vigilante this. Mostly because they didn't really trust, right, the peacekeepers who are the official law enforcement on the planet. Unfortunately, they were noticed by the peacekeepers, were brought in, and things in that meeting went astonishingly well. Where the peacekeepers have actually agreed, right, to let our trio take the lead and also to provide some support in terms of just like a couple officers that are going to uh, be there supporting right the trio. So that's it. So that's despite the fact that the lieutenant we talked to was not particularly friendly to us, but nonetheless, hey, we got what we wanted, so good enough. Okay. So the next scene, okay, where we are on the timeline, we know that this assassination attempt is supposed to happen on Friday around noon. Right now, we are on Wednesday, 3 p.m. So let's break out the gemulator and decide what we're going to do next. Right, so by the gemulator's plan, the first step as we approach a scene is to imagine the scene. So what we expect the scene to be. Right, so I think in this case, I thought I had printed that stuff out. In any case, so in this case, I think what I'm imagining is going to be happening is that we're going to be meeting in the hotel room with the peacekeeping officers that are going to be assigned to us. Oh, here it is. Imagine the expected scene. So, what would happen next in the story? Think in broad strokes, is we're going to have to change some elements after the scene transition. That's it. Right. So imagining, yeah, that's what the next thing would be to have happen is that we are making plans in our hotel room. It's kind of what are we actually going to do there? Like we have some sense who the assassin is. We know who the target is. We know kind of the location a bit, right? We know a little bit about that. We've staked it out, that kind of thing. So we need to figure out what are we actually going to do with the manpower we have. So we're going to have a total of, at this point, we believe we're going to have 5 people available. Right, so 2 peacekeeper officers plus our trio. And so we need to figure out how we're going to use the people. What are we actually going to do on the day of to try to prevent this attack from happening? Okay. Now, we have considered other things in the past. So things like, well, if we know who the assassin is, why don't we take her out? The reason, of course, being, well, it's a big organization, right? So taking out the intended assassin might just lead to somebody else being reassigned, and then we actually lose some advantage. So we're not going to do that, right? Or we could possibly try to get the meeting postponed or canceled or something like that. But again, that really wouldn't help us long term because it just means we're going to see another attempt in the future, right? So the hope is that we're going to have a strong enough response that this is going to be something that is going to maybe have a lasting impact. Maybe we can hope. Okay. All right. So we need to make some plans. So that is what we're going to be. We're going to be there in our hotel, right? Making some plans with the peacekeepers. Since we are the ones taking the lead, our location is where we're going to be meeting. So now let's see if this is what actually happens. Right. So we roll on our scene transition table very important to remember is that last scene, our goal was achieved, our goal being to secure some help, right, from the peacekeepers. And so that means now when we roll our scene transition, it's a D100 roll, and we roll -10. That's a 19, -10 would be a 9. Well, either way, it's no change. Okay, so the scene happens as expected. Right, so let's go ahead and develop first, right, what is our because we need to get all of our elements in place. So we have the location. The location is going to be the hotel room. Our goal is to actually develop a plan. So develop a workable plan. Okay, that's it. So this is something where I don't know if there's going to be a lot of like skills coming in, honestly. Um, like we might have some like, characteristic roles or something like that, specifically imagining with what kind of help the peacekeepers can provide to us. Right? So that is something where I may use their faction statistics for that. Right. So what I'm imagining here. So we know that the attempt is supposed to happen around this lunch meeting. Right. So there's some areas that we need to make sure are secure. So one would be at the entrance to the building. Right? So that is fairly obvious. We need to make sure that we get it in okay. We need to make sure that the dining room where this meeting is going to likely happen is also secured. We also need to make sure where else? I guess the exit and also the way to and from as well. So we have lots of kind of pieces as we go. We track where our victim is going to be. That's the idea. So I imagine here it being a lunch meeting. Odds are that it was a she is going to start out right, at headquarters, right, for the servants of Des. That is um, the name of the charity. So I imagine she's going to start out there, right, traveling from there to uh, City Hall, then inside, right, so going through the entryway and then to wherever a kind of the more formal dining hall would be, right, to meet then with the mayor, city leadership, that kind of thing for this meeting. So that's where they're going to be moving, and then everything gets reversed. Okay, so those are the areas we need to make sure that we have secured. So the question is what is the best way to do this? Right. So we only have 5 people to work with. So we could, right, like assign people to these different positions potentially, but in that case, we would have fairly light coverage in each position, right? So because if we just think about the specific locations, we have the way to and from, right, the headquarters and city hall. I don't know what kind of distance that is, so let's go ahead and roll for that. There it is. Because I'm pretty sure there is a distance oracle here we can use. Yes, exactly. Okay, so it's a D10 roll. Right, so distance 6 in the area. So the options here, just so you know. So 1 or 2 would be behind you, so very, very close. 3, 4 within sight, right? 5 and 6 in the area, 7, 8 far away, 9 or 10 out of reach. So imagine here, the way that I'd interpret this, all of this is going to happen within the same city. It's obvious that these headquarters have to be located not terribly far from the city hall. So it's not like it's out on the moon or something like that. I don't think the planet has a moon. But in any case, so in the area, so we're between far away. So imagine far away here would be that it's kind of another sector of the city, whereas within sight, I think we could actually take that literally in this case, where like you're standing at one building and you can see the other building. We're further than that, so it's in between these two, right? So imagine here that. Um, right, so I'm guessing it's not terribly far, right? So City Hall, I imagine, is a fairly big building. So for it to not be within sight, there has to be significant stuff between like, where the headquarters are and the city itself. So I'm imagining here that like out of reach, I imagine would be like the exurbs, right? So way outside past the suburbs. Far away would probably be the suburbs. So we're talking about kind of the outskirts of the main part of the urban area. That's what I'm imagining is in the area. So right downtown is where we would have the city hall, but then and it's a charity, they don't necessarily have the money to have skyrise downtown, right? So they would have then a headquarters that is out kind of on the edge, right, between the more urban areas and the more suburban areas is kind of what I'm imagining here. Okay. Right, so imagining that that's what we're talking about. So it's a significant distance then that's going to have to be traveled. This is not something where they're just going to walk down the block or a block or two. I'm guessing probably it makes sense given this particular meeting that I don't think it's not public transportation that's going to be used. Instead, I'm thinking that City Hall is going to send, right, a vehicle, right, a private vehicle to transport, right, this guest, right. So that is what I'm imagining, right, the plan would end up being, right. So, and this is something that I'm guessing that our peacekeeper officers would be able to confirm. So let's go ahead and actually check with them just to make sure that my interpretation is not total nonsense, right? Or is in fact confirmed by the reality in the game world. Right, so let's go ahead and check this. So probability here, I think it's very likely that they're going to have a private vehicle sent to them. Let's go ahead and roll. 99 is a yes and. Yes. Right, so I'm just going to interpret that as a strong yes, that, oh yes, definitely, this is what is happening. Right. Okay, so what we know here at this point, right? So the first step we need to worry about is getting from, like, so I guess step one is we're getting to City Hall. So from HQ to City Hall. The second step would be just like the entrance of City Hall. So like the big lobby area that we looked at, which we noticed is not particularly secure. Three is going to be the dining area, and then we reverse it all. So here's the question. So do we think it makes more sense, right, for us to try to follow along, uh, or, right, so we could try to follow the victim along, in effect acting as kind of, I don't know, an undercover bodyguard kind of thing. I guess it doesn't have to be undercover, but I think that's what we're going to want to do because our goal here, I think, is in large part to uh, not just stop the plot, right, but to catch the people involved with it. If it was pure prevention, then we just cancel the meeting. Right? Uh, okay, so we want to actually catch the um, potential perpetrators. Okay, so in that case, well, I feel like just following the person around is going to be real risky. Like, I think we want to be prepared, especially in City Hall. So I think it might make the most sense. Right? We need to split our people up, at least for the first steps. Now, naturally, once, like, if the meal happens as planned and nothing happens by that point, then we can start pulling people. Similarly, do we need to have people watching the way to and from if we're just going to be in City Hall for the next 2 hours? Yeah, probably not. Right, so that's kind of the way that I'm imagining. There are lots of ways this plan can go wrong, obviously, but but that's the way I'm thinking at the moment. Okay, so I think we need to start assigning people. Right. So I think on the way there, we're going to spread ourselves a little bit thin, but then we're going to be able to concentrate ourselves a bit. So from HQ to City Hall, I think we need to assign somebody here. So we have our two peacekeeper officers as well as our trio. Right, so we have, Jeannie's the one that has the experience in law enforcement. So that would be potentially quite helpful. She's the one that actually has some ability to engage in gun combat. Right. So it might actually have makes sense. Okay, then Lionel, he has a little bit of experience with gunnery, but that really doesn't. That's not relevant here. I mean, we're not on a ship where he's going to be operating these things. Right? Um, Now Vince Clark, he has ground vehicle experience, which that could be really useful on the travel side of things. Right. So I think here's what I think might make sense. Right, so let's go ahead and we'll plan, right, that Vince is going to be our driver. And I think Jeannie is actually going to be shadowing, right? So Vince is the driver. Actually, maybe what I should do instead of trying to squeeze is this tiny box on the form here. I'll show you this. It's that tiny box in which I'm trying to fill everything in. I'm going to put this in the notes section. So this is our plan. And I'm just going to make a plan for each person involved, right? So we have then 5 people involved, right? So Jeannie, her plan is she's going to be the one shadowing our potential victim, whose name, boy, that name escapes me. Yes. All right, Amy. Amy Hannah. All right. Then we have Vince. He's going to be the driver. Based on his abilities, that seems to be what makes the most sense. Right. Right. Then Lionel. Lionel, and he also has some vehicle experience as well. Also medical, computer, these kinds of things. Right, so I think he's one. I think I'm just going to keep him at City Hall. Right, so Lionel is going to be located at City Hall, and then our peacekeepers. I'm kind of imagining two groups, right? So one being the group that's doing the shadowing, one being the group that hangs out at City Hall to try to make sure everything's okay there, right? So I think both our peacekeepers are going to split them up. So one of them, I'm just going to call peacekeeper number one, really fleshing out this character. Okay. He's also going to be on shadow duty, and peacekeeper number two is going to also be at City Hall, securing it. Now, in terms of timeline, I'm imagining what's going to happen is that early in the morning, right, we're going to have two things happen. So on the one hand, right, we have the shadows are going to be watching the headquarters, right, while at the same time, right, the City Hall folks are going to, try to secure, at least get to where they can observe everything that's happening. So we're going to try to observe what's happening in City Hall. Right then, as noon approaches, right then I guess we're more active. Now, another thing that I want to make sure is that we do actually have some kind of description, I believe, of Marison. Marison Mays was the person who is the assassin. Assassin. We learned their name. Although I think no, we actually didn't get very much information about them, did we? Because we got interrupted. Okay, so Marisol Mays was the name of the assassin. Uh, and we, like, every time we've tried to do research on her, we have failed to do that because we've gotten interrupted by one thing or another, either getting sidetracked onto different research, or it has happened the most recent time when law enforcement showed up and took us down to the station because they had noticed us casing City Hall. Right, um, so I think here, since we are in the midst of trying to develop a plan, I want to see, like, can we actually find some information that would actually be helpful here? Right. So the big thing I need to know is, what does the person look like? And actually, this may be of limited use, given that they might possibly, be in disguise or something like that. But can we find such information? This, I think, it's likely. So I think it's fair to say that most people you can find somewhere, right, on the network. They have a face somewhere. So I think that's very likely. Um, was it likely or very likely? I'm going to say very likely. We'll roll. We've got 73. 73 on very likely is just a plain yes. Cool. And so, nice. Right, so we can manage amidst our planning, right? So we do actually know what the person looks like. Thank goodness, right? As we know, as we learn Marisol May's face. So we know who we're looking for, at least if they're not heavily disguised. Right? Although, as we know, right, adding glasses or taking them off can make you totally unrecognizable. So, so I think that's, yeah, that's good. That's good. Right, so I guess at this point, our scene goal is to develop a workable plan. I think that this is all workable. Now the one thing that I guess is a resource we want to know whether we can actually get. Right? So we have a plan. The question is, can this plan actually be used? So the thing that I want to know is, can we get the big like the big resource that I'm seeing is potentially missing, right? Is oh, actually two possibilities. Does any? I think that we have weapons, but I think the problem is that we're on a fairly high law level planet, right? So that like carrying weapons around is not okay here. Yeah, all bladed weapons and guns are banned, right? So I mean, no, we are working with law enforcement, so I assume that they would have weapons. I'm hoping that we can get clearance to have them too, maybe. That's something let's ask that. So can we get clearance to have these weapons? So I'm actually going to uh, roll this and use the law level. Right, so remember the law level here. Let me double check this. It's an 8. So let's just say that um, for me to, I'm going to give myself a +1 on this because I am working with peacekeepers. So the question is, will they be willing to let us carry our own weapons, or is it only the peacekeepers on our in our group that are going to be allowed to carry weapons? That's really the question. So I'm going to roll against the law level, um, but I'm going to give myself a bonus of 1. So normally the way that I would like to roll for law level kind of checks is that if you roll beneath the law level, then law enforcement becomes relevant. So that means that the lower I make the the target number, the easier it is for me to violate the law, right? So in this case, the standard would be 8. I'm actually going to lower that to a 7. So if I roll above a 7, now equal to 7 is not good enough. If I roll above a 7, then we're okay, right? To have our own weapons, we get that clearance, right, from the peacekeepers. They agree at the very least to pretend that we don't have what they know we have. Rolled exactly a 7. Ha! Okay, so the peacekeepers say no, no, not allowed. We are not allowed to carry our own weapons, which means then either right we have to do what we're told because they will be watching us, or we have to accept that we very well may end up running into problems with the law. All right, which I mean that's an interesting question. In terms of who has weapons, Jeannie does have a weapon. Honestly, I don't think either of my guys do. No, no. Lino does not have a weapon, and Vince does not have a weapon. Now, they both have like, body armor that would absorb a little bit of damage, but no, they don't have weapons. So so Jeannie's gonna have to decide, right? Is she actually going to follow through? Well, given her background, Shivro might not follow through. I mean, okay, so her psychological profile. What is her psychological profile like? Maybe I didn't roll one for her because she has this background. But just as a reminder, so her background is as an agent, right? And one of the um, things about her was that she broke a lot of rules. And she also, right, uh, kind of the reason that she's no longer in law enforcement was that she was investigating the exact criminal organization that's going to be uh, pulling off this assassination, or at least attempting it. Right? And her cover got blown. Right? She had to shoot her way out of it. She's gonna carry a weapon. She's gonna carry a weapon. That's obvious. Okay, now she might hope that that goes unnoticed, right? But yeah, she's that's clear. This is absolutely clear considering her background. And now the other question would be the transportation problem. So this is just do the servants of death, not the servants of death. Do the peacekeepers have transportation for us they could provide. Now, we don't want something that's going to stand out. It's not like we're riding along in a cop car or something like that. But do they have ground transportation for the shadowing purposes that we are able to use? So I'm going to go ahead and roll for them on resources. So the faction gets a +3 on this. I'm going to roll against kind of the standard roll of, oh, for characteristics, it's a 6 plus. So you have really good chance. So add 3 to this. Oh, yes, yes, definitely. So we have 8 +3. That's an 11, definitely. And so we definitely do have the vehicles made available to us for this purpose. Cool. All right, so I guess we've got the elements there in place. So in terms of the elements of the plan, set the pencil down. So we kind of know what we're doing in terms of timeline. We also, according to this, the peacekeepers say no weapons allowed, at least for our civilians. Though we note here that Jeannie will bring hers. She has a laser pistol, so I imagine she could like hide that under a jacket or something like that. Also, they will provide ground transport because we don't actually have a vehicle for our trio. All right. So I think that is pretty good. So I think for developing a workable plan, I'm going to consider that a success. So how long did that take? Right. I don't mean, okay, naturally in real life it took me like 25 minutes, but I'm going to imagine this is something that's going to be measured in hours. I'm going to roll a d6, find out how many hours that took, so we know what time it is now. 3, so that means now it is Wednesday at 6 o'clock p.m. as of the end of this scene. And that is that. So, thinking about what we're going to do next. The thing is, I don't know that it doesn't sound to me like we need to play out Thursday. Mostly because I have no idea, like, what we'd have to do at that point. At this point, the plans are made. I'm imagining that Thursday is going to be very boring to watch because it's going to be just things like securing the transportation, confirming these kinds of things, right? So I'm imagining that Thursday is going to be kind of downtime. So I think we're going to pick up then in the next episode on Friday morning when things are going to start acting. So here, expected scene, I'm just going to go ahead and make a note of this so that I'm ready next time I record. So Friday morning, just starting the plan. Now we will want to divide this up into the two groups. So you'll have the one group that is going to be um, following along the motorcade, right? It's not a motorcade, it's a car, right? It's in effect, it's a ground vehicle, right? So we're just going to be following along them, and then we'll also have the other group at City Hall. So I think that the first one I want to check is kind of the City Hall setup. So start of plan. So I'm going to do the City Hall first, and then we'll follow what's happening with the transportation as we see how Amy Haney gets to or does not get to City Hall successfully. So I think that's a good place to stop. So thank you for tuning in. It's Prof E, signing off.